hard to put this country on the map, to put this country where it is today.
You just don't survive. I know we have a shortage of land on so-called state land, titles. We want to create land on title properly. Not taking a plot that belongs to State House, at State Lodge, and rezone it and allocate it to friends. Really? Someone can take land in State Lodge which they already know that is a controversial area. And really somebody is signing a title deed on land that belongs to the state already? More importantly, under this president? Icona. You don't survive when you do those things. You just don't survive.
If it's a felt need of the family, for example, that the president should not personally be in attendance. So what do we, why not delegate? Why not delegate? Why not delegate? Yes, it's awkward, but unusual situations, unusual circumstances may demand unusual responses. And it will appear, the problem that we have as human beings is that we think they now would have lost, then they have won. But sometimes backing down and then allowing certain things to happen may not necessarily be a loss. It could be actually a sign that you are greater than the other because you are ready to, to back down and give way, and for the sake of the greater good of the country.
Thank you very much, and we are now good to start. I think you share the link. We are hosting Honorable Muhabi Lungu, spokesperson for the Zambia We Want, a recently loose movement that has been formalized and structured into a political party. We expect to host the current interim leader, Mr. Ernest Mwans, I think on Monday, but today we're privileged to share some views through their spokesperson. Honorable Muhabi Lungu is a distinguished diplomat. He served in various capacities at Ministry of Finance and has been a leading voice in our country, and we are glad to host him. Let me just welcome Honorable Muhabi Lungu. Honorable Muhabi Lungu, welcome to today's program, and thank you for making time, and thank you for according us this opportunity to host you.
Thank you for the invitation, my dear friend. Ambassador, I'm very grateful to be here. May I say good evening, good morning to all the viewers throughout the world. I think this is an opportunity for us, so I'm very grateful to be here.
The great opportunity to host you on the Conversation podcast. You're one of the early people that I covered, and you helped the Conversation podcast, the forerunner to this forum, really take off, and great insights you gave us about your life, your participation, especially in the momentous political activities of 1991. To our dear viewers, just you can Google or you can ask AI to give you that podcast. It's very insightful. So don't go into particular details of the life of Honorable Muhabi Lungu. He covered it very well, and I ask you to just look it up and see. But just briefly tell us about yourself and where you are now in your station of life as you help opposition political parties.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for the opportunity. Obviously, I am currently, as you have introduced me, I'm the spokesperson for the Zambia We Want. This is a political party which was announced a little bit more than a year ago. In fact, a year. It was announced in on July the 3rd. My involvement in the political process in this country goes back to when I was 23 years old in 1990. I am now 58 years. Just turned 58 maybe 2-3 months ago. And I have been very active in trying to ensure that our country can go to the next level. I have always wanted to be an agent of change. I have always wanted to be a catalyst for reform, and my preoccupation throughout my political career has not necessarily to get a position or to get a title. I'm not very comfortable with titles. I think that sometimes those of us who have got it as their primary objectives to be movers of an idea are not necessarily concerned with what titles we get. So I have had, as you have said, a lot of jobs. And without going into details, I was part of the student union movement in 1990. I was part of the MMD, and I attended the first convention of the MMD in 1991. I then became a special assistant to Dr. Kaunda. I worked with him for 7 years, 5 of which I was his special assistant. I have been national secretary of the Movement for Multi-Party Democracy just shortly after we lost power. And I was on the campaign committee of RB in 2011. And I've also worked for the Ministry of Finance. I've been at the Zambia Development Agency. I've been an advisor to the government working for JICA. So really, I've got quite a bit of experience in terms of both political governance as well as economic policy and planning as well as execution. So always prepared to lend a hand towards getting my country to the next level.
The current state of the country is a crisis, is a country in crisis and a country in mourning. And let's go to the other one, the country in mourning. Zambia lost its 6th president, Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu, on 5th June 2025. And over 1.5 months later, his remains have not been put to rest. So the country remains, you know, somehow suspended. You can't go past this issue of the late president and the current standoff. Maybe probably start with your condolences and then give us an analysis where we are. And then there's particular reference to Dr. Kaunda, how his remains were treated, because Dr. Kaunda wished that he be put first in Chinsali at Shambalakale, and then later he revised. The point was that he wanted to be laid next to Betty. I was privileged, I was PS at a time when Mama Betty died. Northern Province and Muchinga were under me. And President Michael Sata gave me instructions to go and prepare Shambalakale because Mama Betty and Dr. Kaunda were going to be laid there. So you were spokesperson for 7 years. You can use this opportunity and give us insights to the current standoff where we are. But maybe start with your condolences.
Okay. Yeah, well, certainly the bereavement that we have in the country is a very sad one. Death is never easy. And certainly I wish to convey my condolences to the Lungu family, first and foremost, and then to the larger family of the Lungu, since he was president of the PF at the time. So I also convey those condolences to the PF. I had an opportunity, myself and my colleague, Ambassador George Chilumanda, to have traveled to South Africa when we all thought we were going for a church service and a burial. Unfortunately, when we arrived there, we were told that there was this dispute and the burial never took place. We had an opportunity to actually convey our condolences personally to the former First Lady, to Mama Esther Lungu, and to the family. And we could see that obviously she was in a lot of pain. And she was also in a lot of anguish at the development that had occurred, in that all of us were seated there in church waiting for us to proceed. And the state went to the extent of carrying out what they did. So I think that is unfortunate. My condolences, heartfelt condolences. That is the first thing. The second issue, I think I have to be very blunt, that if you are being fair, if you are trying to look at this thing from all sides and every angle, one has no other choice but to conclude that the manner in which the state has handled this bereavement has been very, very bad. It has been in bad taste. it has appeared that the state as aim has been to punish the family, and that is exactly what they are doing. I think there is no other way in which you can conclude, apart from the fact that this is a government who wants to punish a person who they see as an adversary. It was handled very, very badly, starting from the people who they chose to go and try and negotiate with the family. That is Honorable Kavindele and the former and Leslie Mbola, both of whom I know and I have a lot of respect of. But unfortunately, that both of them had made what one would regard as snide remarks and unfair remarks on the bereavement and on the legacy of Dr. Lungu. And I think that it was very careless for the government to have chosen people who clearly the rest of us knew that they would not be the remarks that they had made. And subsequently, the breaking of the agreement, which was publicized to everyone, we were all expecting. The fact that they also breached that agreement is also in bad taste. The fact that after they were quite sure that the family wanted to proceed with the burial, that they would go to the extent of actually going to put an injunction is also in bad taste. So my view is that the state has handled this very carelessly. And I think that in all honesty, they should have allowed for the family to carry on with the burial as the family had wished. It is not in the best interest of the state or any of us to prolong the issue of having the family keep the body for 2 months now, literally. Now, you also asked the question about the comparison which is being made with the issue of Dr. Kaunda. And I have always personally shared the people that I don't think that that is a very fair comparison. The only similarity between Dr. Kaunda's issue and that of Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu is the fact that you had two former heads of state who had passed on. I think that that is really the only similarity. The differences are the following. The first difference is that Dr. Kaunda died more than 20 years after he left office. And when he died, the people who were in government were not the people who he and the family thought were persecuting him. So there was no acrimony between Dr. Kaunda and the people who were in government. I think that that is a very fundamental difference. On the other hand, President Edgar Chagwa Lungu died shortly after he left office, 3.5 years after he left office. And that the people who the family and the PF saw as their persecutors by the fact that they could not allow him to go to seek medical help, that they were making his life generally miserable, were people who directly took over after him. So I think that people have to understand that that in itself is a major difference. Okay, that one had acrimony with the government, the other one did not. There were maybe 3-4 other presidents between when Dr. Kaunda died and when there was some acrimony with the state. So that is the first difference. The second difference between the two is the fact that my understanding was that in the Kaunda family issues, there was no unanimity within the family about the decision which was being taken by one member of the family who wanted to pursue the interest of Dr. Kaunda in regard to what he was told. But there were other members of the family who actually were of the view that they should side with the government. In fact, I am aware of the negotiations that were taking place with various members of the family of the Kaundas. As you know, and as we've discussed, I think I can honestly claim that I'm fairly close to the family. I wasn't part of the negotiations or whatever, but I was privy to what was going on. So there was no disagreement. However, in the case of the Lungu family, there is absolute unanimity within the family of President Lungu as to what instructions and what desires they believe was given to them. So there was no difference there. And I think that that is a major difference. third difference, and I'll get to the last one in a while. The third difference is this, that at the time that Dr. Edgar Chagwa Lungu passed on, he was president of an active political party. In other words, he was in active politics. And while he was in active politics, his benefits were all withdrawn. At the time Dr. Kaunda died, he was not in active politics, and he had all his benefits. Again, that is a major difference. And lastly, it is actually dishonest to suggest that the burial of Dr. Kaunda took place as a result of a court order. I saw my brother Kaweche Kaunda when he was explaining this, that the court order came after there was already a decision by the state to bury Dr. Kaunda because there were some negotiations with other members of the family and other people who said that they should proceed to do so. So it is inaccurate to suggest that that burial was as a result of a court order. In fact, Kaweche boycotted to the burial on the strength that his father, Dr. Kaunda, had told him that he should do everything possible to prevent the state taking over the burial. So he wasn't even there, okay? So I think that these are cardinal differences. But let me conclude on this matter by saying this. I think that from the perspective that I saw when I had an opportunity to sit with Mama Esther Lungu, I think that in the unlikely event that the court would make a decision that the burial should take place in Zambia with the participation of the state, my fear is that the family feels so aggrieved that they may take the position which my elder brother Kaweche took by boycotting the burial. Now, I hope that it doesn't come to that. But I know of cases where families decide, in our local language, kufwitila. And I don't think that that would be in the best interest of the family, nor would it be in the best interest of the state. So that is where I would leave this matter at the moment.
Clearly, the standoff is totally unnecessary. I think it demonstrates a lack of leadership, and it exposes, in my view, President Hakainde Hichilema's approach to many issues, you know. And this matter probably would have been resolved. What do you think they should have done differently? And the matter is in court. What do you think can be done? Is there still hope to resolve this standoff? Because the hostility keeps on going.
I think that the best way in which this matter can move.
The letter that was done yesterday by the Attorney General's lawyers, where they are saying there are envoys that have been sent by the state to ensure that they see the body, and they're using words like inspect, authenticate. Now, one would wonder, why would they send people to authenticate? First, are they doubting the signatures of the doctors who certified the president dead? What do they mean when they say authenticate? Did that word surprise you? And for me, that goes to lengthen the crisis further, because it sows seeds of discord, and I think pain for the family. I don't know what your views are, Mr. Lungu.
Well, again, I think that, let me be as blunt as I possibly can. I think that the behavior of the state is an act of absolute cruelty to the family of the late Edgar Chagwa Lungu. It's just cruel. It's extremely cruel. And as you are saying, it is an indication of the type of character that I believe is descriptive of those people who feel that they must do what they are doing. In my advice in resolving this matter is for the state to withdraw the court case in South Africa, to apologize to the family for the enormous pain that they have caused to them, and to allow the family to proceed and bury. I think that really, for me, that is the most suitable way to go. So, if I was in the position of President HH, that is the position I would take. Anything else is just a continuation of cruelty to the family. Now, let me also say that if you consider the issue of the affidavit which they submitted, in which they want to inspect the body, I have actually had conversation with a lot of people who believe the propaganda that has been spread by the UPND government, that it is in fact false, that the former president has passed. And I find that that is very detestful, and I believe that it is an enormous ask by the government to ask people to believe that there could be some sort of foul play in terms of creating an impression that someone has passed when that person has not passed. It would be an incredible act to ask that so many people would travel to South Africa, that there would be the Archbishop of Lusaka there, that there would be the Archbishop of Johannesburg, to attend a funeral mass if the family has decided to dupe the state about somebody's death. I think that behavior like this for a country of ours is extremely worrying. And I would not blame those people who believe that there is superstition involved and that there is possibilities, accusations or fears of witchcraft involved. I am a Christian myself. I know that the devil exists, and I know that black magic exists. I don't believe witchcraft, but clearly it appears that some of the players in the UPND government appears to believe in black magic. I mean, one has no other conclusion to arrive at. And that is very sad. In a country which says that it is a Christian nation. And the fact that the clergy, some of the clergy have tried to lend credibility to the cruelty of the state to a family is worrying for me. So if they want to resolve this issue, I think that the best way is for the state to withdraw.
Yeah, this gives us a window, like I said, to President Hichilema's approach to national leadership. Earlier I played a video, I don't know if you saw it, but I might play it again, where at the swearing ceremony, he was literally threatening to take the entire state lodge area where it was degazetted, rezoned, and people were given plots. In fact, Community House is from Forest 26. Then there's famous Forest 27.
Yeah.
Then there's State Lodge. So I think if he wishes to go that way, probably we should go back to Forest 26 where Community House sits. Then we go to Community, to Forest 27 where you have senior people like Jack Mwimbu who are also there. If he's being fair about land issues and land distribution or land crisis, probably he needs to go wholesome. And it gives us a view again of why he probably wanted the so-called Bill 13 to amend and give powers, immense powers to an administrator, a junior civil servant, a registrar. And the nation was alarmed, and I'm glad that today in Parliament that matter was deferred. So define for us the state of the country. What do you think is the state of the country?
I can safely say, with a very clear conscience, that if you look at the various events that have occurred in the last 4 months, that the only way that a person would describe what has been going on in our country is that the last 4 or 5 months have been some of the darkest chapters in our country. If we go back to the revelation and the dispute regarding the ZAM stats and what was being announced to the public by the chairman of the Public Service Commission disputing the figures, if you include the enormous betrayal to the Zambian people of trying to bring a constitution which was not consultative and clearly designed to ensure that it consolidates the power of the executive without asking the general public, If you look at the issue to do with the shooting incident in Mufumbe and the people who were killed there, and the lack of policy direction regarding the gold mining in Mufumbe, if you look at the debacle which we have just been discussing, the cruel treatment that has been shown to the Lungu family, if you look at the Cybersecurity Act and all the arrests of sedition that have happened within the last 3 months, clearly you cannot fail to agree with those of us who are saying that the government seems to be exercising all of its powers to manipulate the public in trying to drive the agenda which is beneficial for the President of the Republic and his party, at the sole exclusion of the opposition and the Zambian people. And so, in my many years of being in the political arena, I think that the last 4 or 5 months have been some of the darkest chapters. They have represented, in my view, what I would refer to as an existential crisis to the national state of Zambia. And I think that if we as the opposition don't get together to ensure that this stops, by ensuring that we defeat him in the months that are remaining, we will be creating a very dangerous situation which has got the potential of going beyond our control after 2026. So the state of the nation is very bad. And I think that it appears that the government really doesn't care what any of us think, and they are determined to ensure that they stifle the democratic process which we started in this country some 30 years ago.
You worked at Ministry of Finance, you're an economist and you've been a diplomat. I think in the state of the country, I'll bring this question. In 2022, Zambia was classified as one of the 6th poorest countries. On the top 20 of poor countries, Zambia was number 6. And then on income inequality, because you have a few people having a lot of money and the rest of the country very, very extremely poor. So again, Zambia was classified as among those countries that are most unequal. Number 1 is, I think, South Africa. Zambia is again number 6. But there have been some development. The Minister of Finance, Dr. Stumbeko Msokotwane, appointed a very renowned statistician, Mr. Oliver Chinganya. I can attest, I've worked with him very well at the African Union. He was at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. He was one of the 3 top directors there. But there's something strange that is happening. You must have noted the statistics that are coming from there. I think there is an attempt to reclassify our country using either fraud or false statistics. Why do I say so? Look at Zambia. Just last year, we experienced the worst drought in 100 years. We have the worst load shedding, power cuts, I think, which we haven't witnessed in the last 60 years. Businesses have been affected very, very severely. Companies have closed. Big companies can't do numerous shifts, maybe 3 shifts, because they just can't afford fuel or gensets, or, solar is also not very reliable. And then Zambia is experiencing one of the worst cost of living crises, I think, in the last 60 years. Amidst that, check the statistics that have come. That Zambia posted a growth between 6 to 8% just last year. They've even now revised, all the other key indicators. And I saw last week a publication on what is being attributed to World Bank, that Zambia now has jumped, is now a lower middle income, it's no longer among the 20 poorest countries, using these fictitious figures and the state of our country. I don't know if you have looked at these recent statistics that have, for example, our lifespan has been changed, I think, from 49 now to 67. Tonga language is the most spoken language in the country, and then there's been a sudden revision of key indicators like inflation rate.
Yeah.
Then there's been an attack on the exchange rate. It has appreciated significantly from 28 kwacha to 1. is now hovering around 23 kwacha. I invite your comment on these matters.
Okay. Let me tackle this from two perspectives. I think because you are basically asking an economic question, but at the same time questioning the statistics that are trying to give us an indication of how well or how bad the economy is doing. So I'll separate them. One of the reasons in which I mentioned the issue of Zamstats as one of the issues which brought all of us together as the opposition is because I think we all realize the importance of statistics, of numbers, of data, because we can only make decisions which are cogent, we can only make decisions which make sense if the data that we are using is reliable and trustworthy. But when a political subtext creeps into the equation, it always creates a doubt in those who are looking at the data. And at that point, it destroys credibility, and none of us can then begin to quote these figures with a level of confidence for which we're supposed to quoting them. Now, I am trained, and I have worked as an economist in the Ministry of Finance, at the Zambia Development Agency, as I said, and at JICA as an economist. And yet, over the last few months, I have refrained from making statements about the economy using figures. There was a time last year in which the president, during an opening of the parliament, boasted that he had a growth rate of, an average growth rate of 5.3% over the last 3 years. And I think he said that in 2012. I wrote a very lengthy article in which I was basically disputing the figures that were being presented to the Zambian people in order for him to arrive at the calculation of 5.3%. And I think that in that article, I proved the case that if you look at the data and the information which was being provided by the Ministry of Finance to parliamentary select committees and to the revisions of the growth figures in terms of projections, actual figures, downgrading of the year, that the story that was being presented about a 5.3 figure was actually inaccurate. I was never responded to by the government. Nobody even made a chance to appeal to them. Beyond, over and above that issue, when the Zamstats was released, the issue of the number of registered voters, which the Electoral Commission had announced that they wanted to achieve, I think they said they had wanted to achieve 10.5 million people who they are going to register. Again, I raised objections, and I wrote a number of articles disputing the possibilities and probabilities of us reaching 10.5 million registered voters, and how in their projection they felt that we could get a certain number of voter turnout, when the average in this country, if you look at that, all our elections is between 35 and 42% of the population. Again, there was no response to that information. There was a demand in that article from me and others who were demanding that we need to have an external audit of the register before we go to the elections next year. And we as a Zambia We Want still demand that there should be a comprehensive external audit of the register so that we are all satisfied that it is above suspicion. That is the second point. The third point is just a snippet of what you've said in regard to the statistical inference that all of a sudden that the Tonga has become the second most spoken language in the countries next over Nyanja. Again, if you look at the growth patterns of all of the various regions and places by which the two languages have been spoken over the last perhaps 4 or 5 census reports, it would give you a trajectory which would make it very difficult for you to come to understand why one particular language group has overtaken another one. Clearly there is a political subtext in this, and there is a way in which you can actually dispute that figure. Now, unfortunately, we have been put in a position where it appears that I would be dealing with this issue because I'm defending my province against the other. That is not the case. In the marketplace, the the language that is usually widely spoken, say in the urban areas or even in the local areas, is determined by the general activities of the population. So, for example, if you're going to have music singers who are going to produce music, you will find that the language which is commonly used by the majority of people will be reflected in the language in which the musicians use in order to sell their music. By the same token, you would be able to delineate this by looking and say, okay, the plays that are put on television, what language are they using? Again, that is also a barometer and an indicator of which language the artist feel will have the greatest resonance if you put it. And I can go on in a lot of areas, even advertising. So if you look at the trajectory and the percentages by which each region has grown, and then you look at what the market is telling you, there is clearly a lot of room for you to dispute that particular statistical inference. So the question becomes, why has it become so important that it had to be publicized and indicated that there had been an adjustment in terms of which language is more spoken? And clearly, again, you would come to the conclusion that there is a political subtext to this. Now, when the government begin to politicize data, the danger is that all of us who like to use data as a basis in which to arrive at conclusion begin to mistrust that data. And therefore it becomes very difficult to discuss economic parameters when there is such a disagreement in terms of what is authentic and what is being made up. So that is the one side of it. The second side of this is this. And I want to give a practical example. Even if you were to come to the conclusion that the growth rate of 6% was actually true, in terms of making a determination as to whether the economy is at a place where it ought to be, you would also need to look at other figures from an economic point of view as to whether those figures are affecting the reality on the ground. So you would need to look also at inflation figures. You would also need to look at lending rates in the banking sector. You would also need to look at other parameters to be able to determine whether the growth rate is actually having a positive impact on the population, including the point that you have made earlier on. Growth does not translate into equity of distribution of that growth. But that is an argument for the other day. But the practical example I wanted to give, just 2 days ago, knowing that I was going to come to your show, I wanted to look smart. Of course, I took two of my suits to take them to the laundry, including the one I'm wearing. And I was oblivious. So the last time I took some suits to the laundry, I think was about 3 months ago, and I couldn't remember how much I paid. I took it to Crossroads, and when I gave the two suits, the bill that came to me was $300. I was a bit taken aback, because I do recall that within the last few years that I had come here from the Foreign Service, that the two suits did not cost me $300. The 300 kwacha. That the two suits just 2 years ago, I paid perhaps 150. Okay, so you can see that there has been, in real terms, in as far as the laundry is concerned, there has been a jump of 100%. Now, I've used an example of a middle class, upper middle class individual who is concerned with his suits. But even if you were to take this to the level of just groceries, you will find that a year ago, the price that I was paying for the 1 liter milk that I think everyone buys was 100% cheaper than the way it is costing a year later. So in terms of the actual cost of living, there are even figures which people can do on their own without relying on the central statistics, because there is some dispute, which will show you that the cost of living is extraordinarily very high, and that whatever gains that may have been brought about by having an increment in the growth figures have all been wiped out by all the other factors which we will probably need another half hour to look at. So there is no equity between the growth of the GDP per capita as opposed to the real impact it is having on the price of commodities, and on the standard of living of the average person on the street. So that is my reflection on that, in that regard.
Yeah, clearly the data, I think that was my point, is that data appears politicized. As soon as you cannot trust the data, then you've thrown it in the political realm. Zambia Statistics Agency must be so credible that no one must doubt their statistics. In fact, even similarly to the state, you know, that's what even causes the emergence of two parallel markets, one a black one which becomes a genuine market, and the official one. They'll tell you $1 is at this rate, but people are willing to buy it or sell it at another rate. The emergence of another market is forced because your statistics and data is not correct.
And you know, my brother, just to cut you off, that if you look at the history of autocratic governments, if you look at the history of dictators, what you call real dictators, the first thing they begin with is to try and distort the figures and rewrite history and have a situation where the old truth is replaced by a new truth. And that new truth, which is reflective of what the government wants to do in terms of trying to manipulate the minds of the people. So this is a very big issue. I mean, I think that in our country, we often enough reduce the importance of these particular issues for the things which are very clear. What the government is doing is very bad. And I think that we as the opposition, together with the cooperating partners, and even the education institutions like the University of Zambia and so on, should be able to demand for a thorough re-evaluation and an audit of all the figures that are being put forward. I work for the Ministry of Finance, and I do know that even the figures that the World Bank and the IMF were using basically were figures which were being given to them by Zamstats, at that time Central Statistics. Now, of course, I am aware that the World Bank and the IMF also do their own due diligence using some of the same information which Zamstats would collect in order to be able to try and verify. But largely, even the figures from the World Bank and the IMF are dependent on what is legally the provider of legal information in Zambia, being the Central Statistics. Now, because there has been a dispute, because there is been a suspicion, I think that it is only fair that there has to be some form of due diligence done on all of these figures by independent bodies. This is not to cast any aspersions to the current director or anything like that, but I think that if they want us to have some form of confidence in the figures that are being presented, I think that they owe us that at minimum. Yeah.
About revising history, you know, this reminds me, just last year, I think a new organization, Nobo Harimwangankumbula Foundation, was formed. I think it was graced by President Hakainde Hichilema, and the guest of honor was the Chief Justice Mwamba. But the talk there was that they were trying to revise history because there were many people who were neglected, who have not been recorded in the history of our country. It's like there was now an attempt to revise our history, just like what you were saying, that autocratic government have a tendency to attempt to write history from their lenses instead of the factual history. ECZ is a matter of serious worry. If we've identified the crisis that we face, ECZ will be the midwifery. It will be the midwife to deliver a new government. But you are aware that I think President Hakainde Hichilema, by various international reports and by our own perspective, is being accused of shrinking the democratic space, is being accused of entrenching tyranny in our country. You demonstrated by the litany of oppressive, repressive, and terrible laws that he is passed or is attempted to pass, literally to strengthen the presidency. And then the utter control of institutions like ECZ. The democratic institutions are under threat, and ECZ is one of them. There is cause to worry. First of all, for the first time in our country, the Electoral Commission of Zambia will not be led by a Chief Justice, by a Supreme Court judge or a High Court judge. It's being led by a lawyer, literally from the street. She could be qualified, but she's not a judge. This has been a significant departure from where the ECZ has been led by a sitting a judge. Secondly, the person appointed, Honorable Mangala Zalumis, has been associated with the UPND. She's literally a member of the UPND. You have McDonald Chipenzi, one of the commissioners. And then you have the Chief Electoral Officer, Mr. Brian Casaro, who there were concerns around his dismissal in 2016 because he was accused of attempting to manipulate results for UPND. With these three key officials, there is great concern if it is possible that ECZ can deliver a free and fair elections in 2026. Then there are concerns around their programs. They're still printing ballots outside the country. I think there appears to be an attempt to introduce either electronic voting, and they've just given a new contract to an unknown company that has never undertaken such works, to a $2.5 million contract to carry works for biometric work for the ECZ. There are clearly serious concerns around ECZ. What's your reflection, and what are you doing about it?
Yeah, I think that it's fair to state that any organization which is playing the role of an umpire or a referee must be above suspicion from the perspective of the players. It has to be above suspicion. Any organization which is an umpire, if there are questions of suspicion, if there are questions of lack of confidence, it is the onus of the government to ensure that that suspicion is removed, and that all of the various components and issues which are being raised by the players, that we don't feel that we can get reliable treatment or justice from this institution, that the government must be compelled to listen. Now, obviously, those of you who know my history a little bit more would know that I have a relationship with Mrs. Alomis, in the sense that I have known her for a long time at a very personal level. When I was a special assistant for Dr. Kaunda, she was in fact the chairman of legal for UNIP. When I was arrested together with my colleagues, accused of treason and murder in 1996, one of the lawyers who represented me was Mrs. Alomis. In fact, she was the one who was there when I was being charged by treason. So I've known her for a long time. So what I'm saying is not in any way trying to bring her as an individual in disrepute, but the fact that people know that she has had political history in UNIP, in other political parties, as well as in UPND, has created a situation where people have lost confidence. And I think that issue must be looked at from a professional point of view. Again, that is the same for McDonald Chipenzi. During the time that he was very active within the NGO world, I actually sat with Mr. Chipenzi on many platforms, together the two of us, whether it was at Radio Phoenix, whether it was in Monze, we would travel. And of course, there is a view, which is a very legitimate view, from a lot of people who say that these are actually political players. You cannot remove that view, which has been arrived at legitimately by people, and expect that they will not have levels of suspicion. Beyond that, If then it appears that there are certain issues which are, and decisions that are being made which appears to be at the influence of politicians, for example, Mr. Chawinga, who claims, and we have no reason not to believe his claim, that I have instructed the Electoral Commission of Zambia to ensure that no PF regalias is used, and then there is a statement from the commission that we're not going to do this. Clearly, people put 1 and 2 together. And you can't blame them for, again, arriving at a conclusion of lack of confidence or of suspicion. So clearly, I think that we have to demand, as an opposition political parties, as a collective, that the issue of the Electoral Commission of Zambia has to be resolved to the extent that all of us have got confidence in it, and that the Electoral Commission is above suspicion. That is the minimum criteria. It has to be above suspicion by all of us who are interested in playing and arriving at a fair conclusion to the game of politics. You know?
Let me come to the issue of unity and national unity, then opposition, unity in the opposition. You've been very instrumental in trying to bring the opposition together. I'm aware that you've played a key role. You've met various stakeholders and probably all the leaders in the opposition, even before, the Zambia We Want was born. Why do you think that it is inevitable for the opposition to unite? Are you suggesting the opposition is so fragmented, so weak, that it can't stand against President Hakainde and the UPND? Why is unity in the opposition so critical at this juncture? Yeah.
My brother, the opposition unity is extremely critical at this juncture. But before I go into some of the numbers, because when you invited me, I said, no, this is a good opportunity for us to thoroughly discuss this issue of opposition unity. So I prepared a few notes which I wanted to share with the audience. I want to reiterate the position given that I am a proud member of the Zambia We Want. We are doing everything possible to try and promote our party, even though it is young. But as you correctly put it, many of us who came to form the Zambia We Want, even before we formed it, our initial trajectory was that we should be able to find a mechanism by which we bring in as many opposition political parties as possible to begin to work together so that we can be able to effectively provide checks and balances much more effective as we are doing now, as a collection of very small individual political parties, and that we would be able to effectively challenge the government in 2026 to the extent that we can defeat them. So that was the premise of the Zambia We Want, and I think that as we started it, other things came in, which I think created some sort of loss of trajectory overall. But I think that those issues I can deal with them at another time. Let me get to some of the issues which I think are very important for me to say. And the position is this, my brother. Getting together as a united opposition front, not just UCA, not just all of us, in our view, is an absolute necessity. It is an absolute necessity. And though I'm now saying that this is required, I think that a lot of people are unaware of the underpinnings regarding the statistical information that we have, which would consolidate that position. And I would like to maybe look at just, if you will allow me, to look at 4 reasons why it is absolutely important to have opposition unity. And I'll go, we can discuss each one at a time, okay? The first reason is this, and I say this because I don't think that the supporters and the followers of many of the presidential candidates are fully convinced. I think that it is very important that all of the supporters within the PF within the Socialist Party, Zambia We Want, ULP, Heritage Party, which we've already been talking, most of us have already been talking, compel their leaders to consider this thing more seriously than they have before. So the first reason is this, and as I said, I have got 4 of them, is that for the first time since 1991, in the elections of 2026, we will not have a contender. As of now, 8 months before we have a general election, there is no contender in the opposition. And the definition of a contender is one who has by themselves present a serious threat to the person I would call as the heavyweight champion currently sitting in the seat. Whether we like it or not, the current heavyweight champion of the world is President Hakainde, who is sitting in the seat. All of the other 9 elections, there was always a serious contender. 10 months before the elections, 1 year before an election. So there was Mazoka and Christian Tembo and the others against the candidate of the sitting government, that is Vamwanawasa. The following elections, the main contender was Michael Sata from far apart. The following elections, the main contender was Michael Sata and HH. The following election, the contender was President Lungu. There has always been a contender. For the first time in the next election, as of now, 8 months before, there is no contender. Now, people might say, but there are those people who participated in the elections in 2021. All of those that participated in 2021, no matter what their strengths are, and there's no intention to denigrate them, apart from the UPND and the PF under President Lungu, unfortunately, and due a bereavement, he is no longer there. The rest of the candidates, starting with Harry Kalawa, who was number 3, followed by Anford Banda, were not able to get a minimum threshold of 1%. To suggest that in the absence of opposition unity, that the third place candidate will be able to be a contender to the extent of getting 50+1 is actually a really, really tall order, which is almost an impossibility. Even if you were to assume that President Harry Kalawa, who was number 3, was to increase by 1,000% over what he performed, and there is no empirical evidence to suggest that that is possible, his tally would probably increase from 25,000, 1,000% to maybe 250. That is at best, with the registered voters that is currently there, 5% of the vote. Okay? So it is not possible. The only way, using this particular example, is for all of the opposition political parties to get together, by 70% of the core group, identify a contender. And that contender has to be identified within the next 2 to 3 months, so that you are then running with a contender for the last couple of elections. So that is the first reason